just wind me up like a little key in the back, and you go and give a talk like some talking doll. And in fact, that sometimes I thought that's what I could do if ever I go away. Just get one of these robots. I've seen the robots can look very lifelike. And you just put it in front here and just put an old CD in, and then, then get it going again. Actually, that has been done already. I'm not even actually many years ago. I read an article about Buddhism in Japan, and in Japan the culture is such that they love like white weddings, and they love Christian weddings. But they always have Buddhist funerals, and I don't know why. It's just fashion. But anyway, the Buddhist funerals were so popular, and it was so hard to get a good monk or a nun to come for the funeral, that an enterprising funeral director spent a lot of money, but he recouped it very quickly, in getting a robot monk. And the robot monk looked pretty similar to an ordinary monk, dressed him in a robe, had a bald head, and from a distance you may not have known the difference. And the point being that when he did the funeral chanting, it was always absolutely perfect, because it was just a CD. And the best part of this was, because it was a robot, at the end of the ceremony, I'm not quite sure how they arranged it, but the monk actually rose up into the air, levitated, and he disappeared through a trapdoor in the ceiling in a cloud of dry ice. Unfortunately, I can't do that here. But it certainly gave funerals a bit of razzmatazz, and it was very famous and very popular. So if ever the monks here get too sick or too old, that's a good example that maybe you can invest in a robot dentist for our Buddhist society. But anyway, just going overseas and having all these experiences, nice that you do pick up a few interesting experiences and a few different ways of looking at things. And the talk this evening, I was going to weave around a nice story. It's an old Chinese parable which I heard on my travels. And it's a parable about priorities, because a lot of the problems in life is when we focus on something which is not worth very much and sacrifice things which are worth far more. Just like sometimes people focus on their work and they forget their family, or they focus on sort of achieving great things, but they destroy all the people around them in the process. I think many of you know that sometimes we get our priorities wrong, and when we do, we suffer, we create suffering for others. So this was another parable about priorities. And it's nice to talk in stories and parables, because, look, at the end of a talk, sometimes I've asked people, was that a good talk? Oh, it was a very good talk. What did I talk about? I'm not quite sure, but it was very good. But the jokes and the stories are what you remember. That's why when I wrote that book, Opening the Door of Your Heart, that was why it was just a whole list of stories. 108 stories there. Because life, is a series of stories. And when we can put, truth and put ideas in a story form, it's not just easy to remember, it's actually more true to life, because that's how we live our lives. Many interwoven stories, and many of those stories are unfinished, and they always will be unfinished, because life is like that. Even when you die, many of the stories of your life just aren't finished yet. And it doesn't matter. Things don't need to have an ending. So, the particular parable which I heard was of these 4 old men. And the 4 old men were outside in the rain. It couldn't have been in Australia, not Western Australia anyway, because we don't have rain anymore. But they were outside in the rain, and it was cold, and they were getting wet and soaking. And the owner of the house, not the owner of the house, the woman of the house, she looked out the window and saw these 4 old men there getting soaked, and so she invited them in. And they said, "No, we can't come in until your whole family comes home. And you decide which one of us to invite in, because you can only invite one of us in. And if you invite the correct person, all 4 of us will come in. If you invite the wrong person, only one will come in." And this was the story. So when everybody came home, then the family had a meeting. They said, these 4 old men are getting soaked outside. You've seen them outside, but they won't come in until we decide which one of them to invite first. And if we get it right, they'll all come in. And the 4 men were called wealth, success, peace, and harmony. And so the father said, I work so hard, and even though I work hard, it's very difficult to make any money. The government takes most of it in tax, and what I bring home after tax is so many bills to pay, and life is so hard. So what I really want, I want wealth. And the wife said, no, I want success. I want just my family and you to be successful in life. Success is much more important than wealth. No, it isn't, said the father. Wealth is more important. No, said the wife, success. Wealth is more important. And the daughter said, shut up, you two. All I want is some peace. And they said, that's actually quite true. We need some peace in the house. So he said some peace. And the father said, well, some wealth would be good too. And the mother said, no, I really think success is the best. And so the 3 of them started to argue. And then the son said, look, all I ever want in my house between my mother, my father, my sister and me is some harmony. That's really what I want. And so they all thought, actually, I think you are correct. So they invited harmony first into their house. And when they invited harmony in, he told them they'd made the correct choice. Because when harmony comes into your house, then following right behind comes peace. And with peace, you'll also find success. And with success, you'll also find wealth. So all the 4 old men came into the house following harmony. It was a wonderful story about the priority of having harmony above all things. Because without that, the other 3 will not come in. But it's hard to understand what actually harmony is in our life, even though we recognize it when it's there, that sometimes it's so difficult to achieve. And a lot of the times it is because we create so much disharmony when we think that we're right and the other people are all wrong. Last night in my talk in Singapore, there was actually a delegation from the Interfaith Council or Society in Singapore. Because even though I'm a Buddhist monk, they respect that what I say is interesting for everybody. And so that people from the different religions came along to listen to my talk. And I mentioned that story about harmony, and they really loved it. But they were also asking, now how can there be harmony between the different religions, between the different political parties? How on earth can there ever be harmony between the West Coast Eagles and the Fremantle Dockers? Or even better, how can there be harmony between the English cricket team and the Australian cricket team? So how can we... I read even in the Thai papers, I heard about the cricket match over there, so it was news even over there. So anyway, just how can we create a sense of harmony in our world? And the main trick is something which I think I mention this almost every week now. It's the reason that we can have harmony is we don't think of ourselves anymore. We don't just think of Buddhists. We don't just think of my football team or my cricket team. We never think of ourselves, nor do we think of the other. I know in Buddhism, those of you who study Buddhism, you know that, because sometimes people object to me, said, can't we have a talk about more theoretical about Buddhism? But everything which I say here is actually based on the teachings of the Buddha. It's very straight and down the line Buddhism, but I just adapt it to your lives. So if you want to actually read and understand what the Buddha actually taught, we have those in the books. What I do in these talks on a Friday night is, this is what the Buddha said. Now what does that mean for the practicalities of your daily existence? And in sort of classical Buddhist teachings, we have the 2 main schools of Buddhism, which you may have heard about, the Theravada and the Mahayana. The Theravada, that's us lot, our mob, from Thailand, Sri Lanka, Burma, Laos, wearing these type of brown robes. And the Mahayana is, people know it's a Chinese tradition, the Zen monks, the Taiwanese. Actually, that many of the Vajrayana monks say that they're part of the Mahayana. So That's actually the two main traditions. And somebody was asking me yesterday in Singapore, what is actually the main difference between those two? And of course, traditionally, the main difference between those two traditions, this is what the Mahayana says. The Mahayana, they want to sacrifice themselves for all other beings. It's a compassionate tradition where you even sacrifice your own possibility of enlightenment for others, so you'll always get reborn to come back again. That you'll do anything, even breaking your rules for a monk, to help other beings. And it's one which takes helping others to be the most important thing. And what they say about the Theravada is that just we're in it for ourselves, for our own enlightenment. So, we like to sort of spend time on retreats and, doing a lot of meditation for ourselves. Maybe we're not so generous and so compassionate, so they say. And so sometimes they ask me, Ajahn Brahm, what tradition are you from? Are you from that selfish tradition or the compassionate tradition? And of course, I say I'm from neither tradition, because that's nothing to do with Buddhism, splitting these things up. And I say that both of those traditions are wrong, and I explain why. Again, in the form of something which is very close to your hearts, your relationships. Because someone just asked me beforehand about the relationships. I didn't have much time to answer your question wherever you are, so I'm trying to answer it now with this talk about harmony. And it's when you're in a relationship, if you're thinking of the other partner, that's like Mahayana. Like you're a Mahayana practitioner in your relationships. You sacrifice yourself for your partner. And the other partner is usually the Theravada or the Hinayana. You're just in it for yourself. What I get, what I need, what I want. It's a selfish part. And of course you know that both don't work. You've heard me say even last week, in a relationship you never think of yourself, you should never think of your partner. Who should you think of? Us. Yeah, I tell it every week. Us. So it's not about me, it's not about them, it's always about us. So it's not Hinayana, it's not Mahayana, it's not sacrificing yourself for others, it's not being selfish, because we're in this together. In this life, in this community, in this country, in society, together. And it's all about us. And once you have the idea of us rather than me or him or her or them, that's when harmony becomes very obvious and possible. When it's about me, again, you're destroying that harmony. When it's about me, it's you're wrong, you better ask forgiveness, you better fix up your act, because I was right. And when it's about them, you're such a sacrificer that nothing ever gets solved in this life. You just burn yourself up. It has to always be about us, which is why should one forgive or ask forgiveness of the other person? Because if it's all about us, whose problem is it? Whose fault is it? And of course it's never his fault or her fault or my fault, it's our fault. So what harmony means is we don't lay the blame on this person or that person. And even more importantly, we don't lay the blame on ourselves. It's our fault. So who should ask forgiveness? We, if anybody, should ask forgiveness. Not him, not her, not me. We. I was talking in Singapore that even in the monks' rules of discipline, there's a huge amount of wisdom in the way the Buddha instituted, the rules and regulations for running Buddhist monasteries. And he said one of those rules, if ever there is a conflict or a difference of opinion, and then sort of monks being sort of normal human beings, that sometimes he would argue and say the wrong things, and he said sometimes there may be some hurt, but when there is the hurt, that what you should do is never sort of lay the blame on anybody, but instead to do this wonderful procedure called covering over with grass. Just bury it and let the grass cover it over and forget about it. Because sometimes by trying to bring up that past and blame somebody, what are you doing? Is that really going to be solving the problem and moving happiness, peace and harmony forward? How can there be harmony when we're blaming some people, punishing them, putting them in jail, putting them against a wall and a firing squad in front of them? Is that the way we can create harmony in this world? The Buddha said that when there is such revenge, that there will always be ill feeling. It will be put under the surface for a while, but it will have to surface later on. Punishment is the cause for future seeking of revenge. You know, you've been hurt many times, each one of you. And just when you get angry, what are you getting angry for? It's just you want revenge. And it's a stupid thing to do. Please forgive me if I keep repeating some of the tales which I may have told last week, because I can't remember the talk I gave last week because there's been about 10 or 15 talks in between, going all over the countryside and just talking. But I will never forget a story which I read in the newspapers about this road rage incident in New York many years ago. You know, when road rage started, it usually starts in the United States and gets copied in the rest of the world. But there was, I don't know what the incident was which started this, but the two cars were chasing after each other. One driver was very, very outraged and incensed about what the other driver had done. You know, totally un-Buddhist, not sort of forgiving and letting things go. And this is what happens when you are angry and you seek revenge. The second driver chasing the first driver caught up with him at the red traffic lights in a major intersection in Manhattan. And so, the other car was stopped, and so the guy who was really angry jumped out of his car and started bashing at the window, trying to get into the other car, and just, I don't know what he was going to do to the other driver, but the other driver was totally scared and terrified when this mad guy was banging on the window, trying to break it to get in. But fortunately, the light changed in time, went green, and so, the person who was very close to being a victim managed to speed off. And the other guy who was banging on the window turned around to get into his car to carry chasing him, but found out the car wasn't there anymore. He'd been so angry that he'd left his door open with the keys in the ignition. You can't do that in New York. Street kids will see that, and one of them got in the car and drove it away. And so this guy had instant karmic retribution, standing in the middle of an intersection in New York with no car. That's what happens when you get angry like that. You always lose out, because when you're angry, you're not really aware of anything except the object of your anger, and you can get into big trouble many, many times that way. And that was a beautiful story of what happens when you just get obsessed and lost in anger. That's all you can see, and you can't see anything else. And why do we do that? It doesn't make any sense at all to me. So, instead of actually seeking for retribution, which is actually lingering in the past and trying to fix up the past, how can you fix up the past? That person has done that. No matter what you do back to them again, it doesn't mean that you're going to take away the hurt and the harm which they did to you. If you get revenge, that's just double pain. They've hurt you, now you've hurt them. You're adding to the suffering in this world, you're not removing it. And don't think that you've got to teach a person a lesson so they never do these things again. You know how stubborn people are, they'll keep doing it again. That's the nature of our life, no matter how many penalties and penances and punishments we have in this world. People still keep doing it again. There's a reason for that. It's because when there's anger in people's hearts, they will always do bad things. When they don't know how to forgive and let go, there will always be these terrible, terrible defilements in the mind which stop people loving, letting go, making peace with things, and having harmony with themselves and the world. So like covering over with grass being a beautiful method which the Buddha taught was just to let things go. So we have harmony with our past. We don't try to change it or to make amends by justice or revenge And of course that other part of the past is called guilt. It's amazing that I have never delved so deep into guilt to fully understand it. To me it's something which is very, very weird and strange. It's something which I've abandoned a long time ago. It's why feel guilty about what you've done? Because what guilt really means is that you want to punish yourself. Have you ever noticed that in our legal system, the judge or the jury has to decide on your innocence or guilt first of all? And if they decide you're guilty, what happens next? The punishment, the sentencing, the fine. And in our Western psyche, guilt and punishment always go together, which means if you feel guilty, you will seek punishment. And a lot of times, that you're guilty, or you feel that guilt, no one else is going to punish you, so who punishes you? Yourself. That's why guilt is a psychological barrier to peace and happiness and success in life. And so many people destroy their lives simply because they feel they don't deserve to be happy. And any of you having trouble in your relationships, you can't find a partner, you can't keep one. Any of you having trouble just with your personal life, you just can't enjoy the life which we have here. My goodness, this Western Australia is a rich, wealthy, beautiful country, and there's plenty of work for everybody, it's safe, there's no bombs and no wars going on here. If you can't be happy in Perth, where the hell can you be happy? And you've got one of the best monasteries and temples in the... So why can't you be happy here? Why can't you be happy with yourself? And it's really strange that, being a Buddhist monk, that I can't find fault with people these days. And sometimes people come up to you. Some of this counselling business, I see things in a totally different way. I must be weird. That's my training as a monk for so many years. You see these couples coming up for some counselling, and they want to get divorced, and say, you don't like him, she doesn't like, so he doesn't like you don't like him, but I like both of you. What's the problem? That's often the case, because I've known a lot of you for such a long time now, and even if I don't know you for such a long time, I can actually suss you out pretty easily. I've got some good meditation, and you're really nice people. How come you can't live together in peace and harmony? It's just got into some bad habits. If you could only see what I see in you, then your marriage, your relationships will be just so beautiful and wonderful. So that's actually what you really need to do, to see the beauty in you. And what do you do with that? You just let go of this past. You harmonize with the past. And also you harmonize with the beauty in the past as well as the pain in the past. That's life. You're harmonizing with truth. Is there anyone in this world who's never done anything bad or wrong or stupid? I've done lots of stupid things. I've done lots of wrong things. I was actually telling people in Singapore about, probably the last time I really felt guilty. Really guilty for something I'd done, and I've kept that for so many years. And actually the solution to that, there was when I was a student, I was in Cambridge, actually over in Thailand. I gave this talk to the Harvard and Cambridge alumni. I had a great time with all these people who used to, these Thai people who went to Harvard or went to Cambridge. And because I was sort of one of them, I gave this nice talk. I had a really nice time sort of thinking of all these old times in sort of Cambridge and Oxford, and giving that sort of an angle about Buddhism, and just how that it was very easy for me to sort of move, from Cambridge to the Buddhist monasteries and the temples, and it was just seamless. I wasn't really giving up anything. I was just following this smooth trajectory of my life. But anyway, sort of at those sort of talks, I was talking about an incident that when I was at Cambridge, I came from a poor family. I only got scholarships. That's the only way I could ever afford to go to such places. The government was very generous in those days. And because I won scholarships, that really helped enormously. But nevertheless, I still had to find jobs during the vacations, always finding jobs somewhere. Sometimes it was hard to find jobs as a student. And I once got one of the worst jobs in the whole world, selling encyclopedias door to door. I actually did that. And it wasn't actually, it was children's encyclopedias. And I was actually taught, had sort of a training session first of all for 2 or 3 days, taught this sales technique, which was basically to make the parents, you look for these new suburbs and parents who just had young children, and if they had young children, the first question you'd ask, I'm doing a survey, are you interested, have you got any children, how are you interested in your children's education? Of course they are. That's just getting your foot in the door. And then afterwards, a series of questions which were wholly designed to make those young parents feel that they were just one level down from child abusers if they didn't buy your encyclopedia. And that's what it was. And my ethics weren't that strong in those days, but the worst thing which happened to me, I actually sold one of those encyclopedias. I sold it to this lovely family. I can visualize it even now, the impression it made on me. This young couple who just had their first child, and maybe the child was about a year old. And they wanted the very best for their child, and they saw this encyclopedia, and I convinced them to buy it. And when I went home that night, I didn't sleep well. I felt so guilty. I felt terrible that the next day I gave up the job. So I can't do this anymore. If I'd have actually remembered their address, I'd have probably gone back there and sort of, given them the money back or whatever. But I couldn't do that. I felt terrible. And that was there in my mind for years. And one evening here, it must have been about 15 years ago, I mentioned that story about, that I felt guilty for years about that because I felt of that poor family and how they must have suffered because they didn't have much money and how they got landed with this stupid encyclopedia which was hopeless. But then I said that, when I became a monk, I learned how to forgive myself. And even rotten things which you did, I let them go. But then after I gave my talk, this woman came up. I'm not sure if she's here today. I can't remember who she was. And she said, life is just so strange. And I had to come up and tell you this. But, I was from England myself. And when I was a small child, some student came to the door of my parents' house and sold us a children's encyclopedia. And I loved that book. That was my favorite book. I had so much happiness and fun from that book. I don't know if it was you, but maybe it was. And thank you, Ajahn Brahm, for selling me that encyclopedia. And I thought, my goodness, life is like that. I reckon that probably was that woman, because life is like that. We meet each other, we cross our paths, even though it's just so coincidental. Those coincidences happen. It probably was her, to teach me a lesson that sometimes we think we're doing something wrong, and actually it turns out to be the most wonderful thing in a person's life. I often mention that I had one girlfriend especially who I was really, really keen on, but she dumped me. I'm sure she must feel guilty, but if ever I'd met her, if she's been guilty about that, I'd say that's the most wonderful thing you do, girlfriend, for dumping me, otherwise I'd never found Buddhism and become a monk. So the thing at the time, what is guilt anyway? Oh, what was this other story? This was from Western Australia when I first came up here. There was a fellow who was working up in the mines in the northwest. This is many years ago. And his job, apparently, he told me, was to drill the holes in the rock face. I'm not sure what they were mining, put the explosives in and set them off to crack the rock face. And so he would work at night alone because it was a dangerous work at that time. And the other workers would come in the middle of the day. And once he cracked the rock face with the explosives, then they would come and dig out the ore. And he said he'd been doing that for many times. He was very, very careful and very, very skilled with explosives. But that actually was his downfall. He was so skilled that the tunnel was almost perfectly round, And he was working one night, and he heard a sound of something coming towards him, a strange sound. He realized it was one of the carts, the ore cars. And it was coming straight towards him because someone had left off the brake. And he realized there was no way to go, that would actually come straight towards him. And because he was so good with his explosive work, there was no nook or cranny to hide. It was going to hit him. And the very last minute he just tried to jump above the cart, but it caught his leg and cut it off. And he realized that there would be no one coming to meet him for another few hours until the next shift started. And there he was, in the darkness, in the end of the mine shaft, with a leg cut off, bleeding, in great pain. They did manage to get him in time before he lost too much blood, and he got taken to the hospital. And he said that was a wonderful thing which happened to him. He said he had this marvelous spiritual experience at the end of the tunnel. Something which he said, I can't say this, something he said was worth losing a leg for. A sense of peace and harmony, a deep sense of understanding about the nature of life. And it was such a great experience that a few days later in hospital, one of the workers there, the one who had left the brake off, tried to come in to see him to say sorry, but would only get as far as the door. And when the guy who'd lost his leg said, "It's okay, it's all right, you don't need to feel guilty," he just ran away. Sometimes we think we've done some terrible things, but if we look at the big picture and look deeper into things, it's actually not that bad. It's all part of the journey of our life. And being in harmony with the journey of our life means we see this bigger picture, and the things which we were ashamed of, the things which we thought were wrong, are part of things. Somebody's really hurt you and you've hurt other people. You're in such harmony with these things that you accept everything. In harmony just with the whole universe, not just that part which you like and approve of. And it's the same with just other things in your life, the disappointments or the fears of the future. Being in harmony with things means we make... Sometimes we understand that the things in life which we reject, the things in life which we would love to get rid of, are there for a purpose. I often mention the story that when I first went to our monastery down in Serpentine, it was a forest, and by that time, this was 27 years ago now, there was a lot of dieback in that forest, and so there was a lot of dead trees. Now I came from Europe, where the trees were mostly alive. So when I saw the dead trees, I wanted to get the chainsaw out and cut down those dead trees. They were ugly. Who wants to live like in a cemetery forest? And so if you could take down the dead trees, and all the live trees would grow up and have this beautiful green forest with leaves everywhere, and these dead trees were just a blight on the landscape. So I thought the dead trees were terrible, until somebody told me, and it was true, that in those dead trees, that was the habitat for many possums and kookaburras and many other lizards and birds. That was like a condominium for animals. And when I understood that, no way would I ever want to cut down those condominiums, those apartment blocks for so many creatures. I actually realized what I thought was ugly was actually part of the Australian forest, and it actually was very good to be there. So I realized that what sometimes I thought should be destroyed and abandoned actually was important in life. I realized that harmony in a forest was having dead trees as well as live trees. Somehow that nature was showing me that harmony. And it was me who didn't understand nature. And I wanted to change it from my idea of beauty, rather than nature's long evolution towards harmony. And I wondered how many other things in life do we try and change the world for our idea of harmony, rather than actually learning from nature and learning from this world and learning what harmony truly is and actually making peace with that harmony. Because really the sign of harmony is that peace follows. And if there is no peace, it must be that there's some interference with the harmony of things. So, are you at peace with your life? Harmonize with life. And harmonize doesn't mean with cutting down the dead, rotten trees of your life. The wrong things you've done, the bad things you've done, or the bad things which other people have done. Making harmony with things means embracing everything which happens in your life. Embracing it and seeing its beauty. Sometimes that we aspire towards perfection, thinking that that is going to cause harmony in this world. No, harmony embraces imperfection. Now, one of the person was asking me about her relationship just before, and they says, well, I'm trying to make the partner a bit more perfect, and I'm not perfect. Of course, that was that old story of relationships. I wanted to tell her that, but didn't have time. That once there was this guy, and this guy came from a very, very wealthy family. And he was brilliant at university. He got a double first. And he was playing sort of soccer for this really good team. He was a great sportsman, very rich, very talented, and incredibly good looking. And he thought of himself as a perfect guy. And he said, if I'm the perfect guy, I want to marry the perfect girl. Why not? So he went looking around for the perfect woman. And he went all around sort of Melbourne looking for the perfect woman. He actually found a very beautiful girl. He went out with her a while, but he couldn't marry her. And the reason was because she couldn't cook. And he wanted someone who could actually make him dinner every now and again. He would cook too, but he wanted someone to also cook. So he couldn't marry her. So then he went over to Sydney. And in Sydney he found a girl who was very, very beautiful, even more beautiful than the girl in Melbourne. And she owned her own restaurant. She was such a fantastic cook. But he couldn't marry her either, because her thought that she was stupid. She'd left school before year 12. So she didn't really know much about the world and life. She couldn't have a deep conversation, so she wasn't perfect enough. And finally, he should have started here. He came to Perth. And there he found this woman who actually was like a supermodel. Part-time she modelled clothes for Myers. She was gorgeous. And she actually owned 5 restaurants. She was a fantastic cook. And she was so intelligent. She had a degree in philosophy and also a degree in business. A degree in business from Harvard, philosophy from Cambridge. If she was from Oxford, she wouldn't be perfect. That's just my joke. But she was absolutely perfect. And he went out with her for a while, but then he couldn't marry her. She actually dumped him. Because she was looking for the perfect man. In other words, if you try looking for the perfect girl or the perfect man, these things, they just do not exist. And this is the big problem with relationships. Whatever relationship you want to have, you realize that there's no such thing as a perfect man, a perfect girl. And what actually love is, what harmony is having this great spiritual leap to be able to love someone as they are, even though they are imperfect. If you don't do that, you will never have any proper relationship with anyone in this world. Your relationship will be a bit of a fake. It won't be relaxed. It won't be harmonious. Because when you learn how to have a relationship with the imperfect people in this world, then you can have a relationship with yourself, the imperfect me. Otherwise, are you ever going to be perfect in this world? Of course you're not. You're always going to have stupid things you do, wrong things you say, bad jokes which you tell other people. That's my big imperfection. And I don't mind saying that. Actually, it's a long time since I've said the carrot joke. Do you remember the carrot joke? I don't care if you do remember it, because you're going to hear it again, because that's my imperfection. Just a few weeks ago, here in Perth, there were two carrots walking down the road, just minding their own business, and this stupid drunk driver lost control of their car and hit one of the carrots. And the carrot was so badly injured that his friend, the other carrot, Mr. Carrot, called 000. Call the ambulance. So I thought I was in New York. That's 911 is in New York, isn't it? You know, I just travel so many places. I don't know where when I wake up in the morning, I don't know where I am. That's true. You know, so I look around. What country am I in today? You know, just even on Sunday, I'm going to Sydney, and next Saturday week, not tomorrow, going to Malaysia. I just go travelling far too much. But anyway, I'm in Perth today, so it rang 000. And the ambulance came within 5 minutes, took one look at the injured carrot, straight into the back of the ambulance to Royal Perth Hospital, straight into the emergency room. And his friend, obviously, you know, what happens in an accident, your friend goes in the back of the ambulance with you. Straight into the emergency room, you know, triage, really, really terrible situation this poor carrot was in, and straight into surgery. And I don't know if you've ever sort of followed someone, a loved one, into the emergency room. They leave you in the waiting room. And you're just waiting and waiting. You don't know what's going on because everybody's so busy trying to sort of heal these people. So it took about 2 or 3 hours before the doctor came out. And he said, you know, are you the friend of the injured carrot? I said, yes, that's me. He said, it's a dead giveaway anyway. You don't get many carrots in the emergency room as Sir Charles going to hospital. And the doctor said, I've got some good news and bad news for you. Your friend, first of all the good news, your friend's going to make it. We've saved his life. The bad news is he's had very, very bad injuries to his brain, and he's going to be a vegetable for the rest of his life. That's one of the worst jokes. It's still very funny. So there we go, that's my sort of weakness, and I'm sort of not perfect. But I hope you love me for that. And look, that's the only way that we can have a harmonious relationship with ourselves and with others. So please put aside all this perfection, because when it's perfection, that's where you get fault-finding, anger and guilt from. And many people are so guilty, they just cannot make peace with themselves and peace with the world and peace with life. They don't have harmony. They've got problems to fix, first of all. And without that harmony, where can there ever be peace? So a lot of times we say, oh, to get harmony, you've got to change, first of all. Well, to get harmony, I've got to change. It's my fault. It's no one's fault. It's our fault. And harmony means let's forgive that past all together. Not just one. All together. We have to fix it. Not me, not you. We, us. And when as a community, as a group, we sort of cover it over with grass, let it go, for goodness sake. Why do people keep carrying these things for such a long time? Some of you have been carrying things over since you were so young. You still haven't let that stuff go. Come on, let it go. As for me, you know, what I did this morning, I've already let that go. I can't even remember what I did this morning. Did I do something wrong? Yeah, I think I overslept this morning. That's because I was tired, but you know, people were knocking on the door trying to wake me up this morning to get breakfast before I went on the plane. That was my mistake this morning, but who cares? Sometimes we all get tired sometimes. So, there we go. Sometimes we make mistakes, but we let it go. And the reason why we let it go, because we love it. We love ourselves. That's one of the great things. So what love does, it gives you the opportunity to forgive. You're kids. Those of you who've got children, children do stupid things sometimes. They make mistakes. Somebody asked me, what was the worst thing I did as a kid? They're doing an interview somewhere recently. And I said, one of the worst things I did as a kid, when I was only about 10 years old, I made a bomb in a tin can with my mate. I still remember Christopher Nightingale he was. I think he's graduated to be a terrorist. I don't know. No, he's a very good man. So there's two 10-year-old kids, putting some chemicals together and putting it in a tin can and sort of setting it off. And it worked. It went bang. And I was really, really proud. I felt so good about myself until I got caught. Just kids being kids. So, make mistakes and do stupid things. But, in the end, we forgive ourselves. It's just kids being kids. They're just husbands being husbands. Wives being wives. Ajahn Chah once told this very beautiful, very simple simile. He said, once there was a farmer. And the farmer had a chicken. And he wanted the chicken to be a duck. He tried to make the chicken go quack, quack. But the chicken just wouldn't do it. He tried to make the chicken sort of swim in the lake, but he couldn't do it. Why? Because he was a chicken. And that fellow got a headache trying to make the chicken being a duck. And that's a very stupid farmer, isn't it? Chickens are chickens, ducks are ducks. Doesn't matter how much you want your chicken to sort of swim in the pond and go quack, quack, your chicken will not do it. You just get headache. And the moral of that story is, if you want your partner, your husband, to look like Brad Pitt and be as compassionate as Ajahn Brahm, no way! You're just trying to get a chicken to be a duck. And if you want your wife to look like Angelina Jolie, or I don't know who else it is, and to be really sexy and nice and be such as good cook as... who are the great chefs? Nigella Lawson. Is she a good cook? And to be as wise as of our nuns, who come here. No way! She's a duck. She can't be a chicken. So how many suffering do we have in life? Always trying to make chickens be ducks. Or ducks be chickens. And that very simple simile is this... covers most of the cause of suffering in life. We're trying to make life be something it can't be. Trying to make others be something they will never be. Rather than just loving your chicken for being a chicken. Loving your duck for being a duck. And respecting your husband for being just a husband. As I keep on saying, check with your friends. They're all the same. Don't think that you have got a model which is not properly sort of made. You can send it back. They don't do recalls for husbands, only for Toyotas. Actually, that has to get taken off the tape, otherwise we'll get sued. There's nothing wrong, and don't think there's something wrong with you. Be in harmony with yourself. As you are. Be at peace with yourself as you are. If you happen to be a chicken, just be a chicken. And be proud of being a chicken. If you're a duck, stand up for ducks' rights. Because a lot of the time, if you're at peace with yourself, all the problems of the world disappear. You're in harmony. Instead of being in disharmony with yourself. What idea have you got of who you want to be? I always wanted to be the greatest lover of my college when I was young. I wanted to be sort of famous, rich, powerful. That's not who I was. And I found out that I had got a lot of peace when instead of trying to be something I never was, just to be myself, and to be happy to be myself, to be at peace with myself. Isn't that what you want? So if you're in harmony with yourself, and harmony with your partner, and harmony with your family, and harmony with life, once you bring harmony in, the first of these elderly gentlemen, then peace follows. If you want peace of mind, you will never find peace by fighting wars. Have harmony. Forgive the past. Cover it over with grass. And then we can always work together. So we have harmony and peace comes in. And once we have peace, then of course we can have success. When we're always arguing, we're not putting our energies and effort on doing something which is going to be very useful in this world. We're not creating a successful world. So much of our resources are just wasted on fixing up problems of the past rather than fixing up the problems of the present. And that's one of the biggest failures of our societies. And that's why we don't get such success. We just live too much in the past, in the prisons of the past. So when we let go of that, we have harmony, we have peace, then we have success. And of course we all need wealth. We have to pay our bills. And with that wealth, there's so many things we can do in this world. So many wonderful projects which are needed. I'm not talking about sort of big casinos, I'm talking about sort of beautiful things which are really necessary in the world, like the orphanage in Bangladesh, which we're raising funds for usually every year at Christmas. It's wonderful if we can have funds for this. I just received a beautiful email, I just checked as I came back from overseas, that there was an old lady in Taiwan who was actually selling vegetables, just a vegetable store, and she would work from the morning until the evening. She's the first at the market, the last to leave. But because she lived very simply, in her life, she had donated over $1 million to charities. And I think Forbes magazine found out about her and wrote an article about her, about the vegetable seller in a small province in Taiwan. And how the heck could she give so much charity? And it was because that she never hardly spent anything on herself. She lived so simply. She was working, she loved working. And she would just sleep on the floor. She would just buy cheap clothes from the other people in the market. And what do you need? Her work was her love. Her family was her clients. And she had such a happy life. And because such a poor lady gave so much, that she sort of got, I think, into the Forbes list of 100 most influential people in the world, according to this email. It was fascinating to read it. There was a person with hardly anything, had so much happiness. From harmony, being at peace with her job, she had the peace, she had the success, and she even had the wealth. And sometimes you see that other people, they've got so much money and they give so little. She had so little and she gave everything, just about. And she's that one happy lady. So there are such things like that in the world. From harmony we get peace, from peace success, and success wealth. But harmony has to come in first, into your life. So everything else you ever want in your life, the great relationship, the sense of being successful in this life, being at ease, being happy, harmony comes in first. And everything else will come afterwards. Thank you for listening. So, any questions or comments about this evening's talk? And I do apologise for the carrot joke. I'm not sure when I last said it, but hopefully most of you forgot it. Any comments or questions about the talk this evening? Gone.